Okay, let's rewind to April 2025. A massive wave of U.S. tariffs just hit, sending this huge shockwave through the entire global trading system. Now, here we are in 2026, and those aftershocks are still creating a brand new economic map, with new winners, new losers, and a whole new set of rules. Today, we're going to break down how that one event is still busy rewiring our world.
So to really understand what happened next, there's one key idea you got to get your head around. It's called trade diversion. The best way to think about it is like this. When a huge barrier pops up, trade is like water. It doesn't just stop. It finds a new path. It diverts, even if that new path is a little longer or less efficient.
And that's the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it? What happens when it's not just one little stream that's blocked, but the entire global map of rivers and oceans gets redrawn literally overnight? In 2025, we got our answer.
All right, so let's start with the moment it all began, the Great Tariff Shock. This is really about how one single policy decision in April 2025 set the whole world on a totally new course.
But here's the crazy part. The first big surprise in this whole story. You know all those doomsday predictions, the economic apocalypse? Yeah, it didn't happen. Instead of some catastrophic collapse, the global economy turned out to be surprisingly tough. Countries and companies just moved with incredible speed, reconfiguring their supply chains. It was like watching them untangle this incredibly complex knot, but in fast forward.
So how did this resilience actually look on the ground? Well, this wasn't just about survival. It was a fundamental rewiring of global trade. We need to look at how this ripple effect created a brand new web of winners and losers.
And you know what? The numbers here, they really tell the story. As those U.S. tariffs slammed the door shut on Chinese goods, trade between the two giants just collapsed. But all that demand, it didn't just vanish into thin air. No, it shifted. Countries like Mexico, India, and the whole ASEAN bloc in Southeast Asia saw their exports to the U.S. surge. They stepped right up to fill that gap. And this really gets to the heart of it. There's a quote from David Lubin at Chatham House that just nails it. The world experienced trade diversion, not trade destruction. That's the key. The flow of stuff didn't stop. It just found new, sometimes more creative, rivers to run through. Which, of course, brings us to the biggest player in this entire saga, China. Despite being the main target of these tariffs, China's response created its own massive set of ripples across this new economic map. Let's explore its, frankly, surprising resilience in the face of all this pressure.
Just try to wrap your head around this number. Even with its exports to the U.S. in free fall, China managed to do something no other country in history has ever done. A $1 trillion trade surplus in a single year. I mean, how in the world did they pull that off?
Well, what China did next was basically a masterclass in economic self-defense. They didn't just sit there and take the hit. No way. They rolled out this multi-pronged strategy. They rerouted supply chains through their neighbors in Southeast Asia, they cut back on their own imports from the rest of the world, and they carefully managed their currency to keep their exports cheap. In a way, they started exporting their way out of their own domestic problems, which had huge consequences for everyone else.
So this global reshuffling wasn't just about the US and China. It created dilemmas and opportunities everywhere. Let's look at how Europe and Africa started forging completely different paths in this new era.
Over in Europe, the message from the new U.S. trade posture was loud and clear. You guys are on your own for security. That pressure led to this historic spike in military spending all across the continent. Nations were suddenly grappling with the reality of having to defend themselves without that old American security blanket.
But of course, this spending spree created this really brutal choice for governments that were already drowning in debt. The question became, are we choosing weapons over welfare? It's a choice that sparked a lot of public anger and political headaches all across the EU.
Meanwhile, a lot of African nations just decided to flip the script entirely. They saw this global chaos not as a crisis, but as a golden opportunity. Instead of getting forced to pick a side between the US or China, they started playing all sides, building new partnerships with places like the UAE, Brazil, and India. And maybe most important, they started demanding that their critical minerals be processed on the continent, shifting from just being a source of raw materials to being a key player in the supply chain. They weren't just playing the game anymore. They were trying to change the rules of the game itself.
So, that brings us to today, the 2026 outlook. After a year of all this massive global rewiring, what does it actually mean for you, for your wallet?
Well, in the US, the impact is really hitting people on Main Street. It's like this business owner said. You're paying these 25% tariffs on everything, and at first,
Maybe you don't notice, but after a few months, it just catches up to you. It squeezes your bottom line until there's almost nothing left.
And it's a similar story over in Europe where it's squeezing family budgets hard. You hear it from people everywhere. If you're on a minimum wage, life is just getting tougher and tougher because the price of everything on the shelf has gone up. And all of this brings us to some pretty serious warning signs that are flashing for 2026. That incredible resilience we saw last year, it might be about to face its biggest test yet. The world's two biggest economic engines, they're both sputtering. In China, people have stopped spending, and business investment is actually going backwards. And in the US, the labor market, which was red hot for so long, is finally starting to cool off.
So, here's where we stand. In 2025, the global economy bent, but it didn't break. The big, critical question now is, with its two most powerful engines losing steam at the exact same time, is 2026 the year the bill finally comes due?